The old house had always been there, a silent sentinel tucked deep within the dense woodlands just beyond the town's edge. For as long as I could remember, it had stood empty, a monument to forgotten lives. 2 decades, people said, since its last inhabitants departed, leaving it to the creeping embrace of nature. Each year, the trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches clawing at its weathered siding, the undergrowth relentlessly pushing against its crumbling foundations. It had become a local legend, a whispered tale among kids, a place everyone knew about but few dared to approach. My own fascination, however, ran deeper than idle curiosity. I'd always harbored an insatiable hunger for the forgotten, a strange pull towards places where time had ceased to flow. Old factories, derelict schools, decaying estates, they all held a somber beauty, a tangible history waiting to be unearthed. Most of my explorations were undertaken with a small band of equally adventurous friends, our shared courage, a shield against the creeping unease these places often evoked. But this particular afternoon, a rare, unburdened expanse of time stretched before me, and the old house called with a quieter, more personal urgency. It felt less grand, less imposing than our usual haunts, almost an afterthought in my mental map of local forgotten places. So, I went alone. My backpack felt light on my shoulders, holding only the essentials, a trusty flashlight, a spare battery, and a water bottle. The sun, a pale disk in the late autumn sky, cast long, spectral shadows through the trees as I veered off the paved road. The driveway to the house was barely discernible, a faint scar in the earth swallowed by a verdant tide of weeds and stubborn grass. Each step crunched softly on unseen gravel beneath the organic carpet, a sound amplified by the sudden quiet of the woods. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, held a coolness that seemed to penetrate my skin, a subtle chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. As the tree canopy thickened, plunging the path into an early twilight, I instinctively reached for my flashlight, its beam a solitary spear piercing the encroaching gloom. The house, when it finally emerged from the tangled foliage, was deeper in the woods than my memory had painted it. 5, maybe 6 minutes of deliberate walking, each minute stretching longer than the last, before its skeletal silhouette materialized. It was an older style, built in an era when automobiles were still a novelty, long before the ubiquitous garage became a standard appendage. A large 2-story structure of dark weathered wood, it possessed the stark utilitarian aesthetic of an oversized cabin, hinting at a past rooted in hardy self-sufficiency. Rust-colored streaks bled from unseen nails, staining the faded planks, and patches of moss clung stubbornly to its north-facing side, a testament to years of neglect. A broken window on the ground floor, a jagged moor in the side of the house, beckoned with an unsettling allure. I approached it cautiously, the crunch of fallen leaves under my boots sounding unnaturally loud. Leaning my head through the fractured pane, I paused, straining my ears, my breath held tight in my chest. 30 seconds stretched into an eternity, each tick of my internal clock a drumbeat in the profound silence. No creaks, no scurrying, no subtle shifts in the stale air within. Just an echoing void. A primal instinct, however, still whispered warnings along my spine. Reassured, or perhaps just stubborn, I pushed onto the front door. It stood ajar, a dark sliver inviting entry, its wood warped and aged. With a gentle push, it groaned open, revealing the abyssal darkness beyond. The air inside was heavy, thick with the smell of mildew, dust, and something else, something vaguely sweet and cloying like old flowers left to rot. The interior was a tableau of slow decay, a frozen moment in time. Sunlight filtered through grimy windows, painted stripes across a living room choked with dust and forgotten relics. A threadbare sofa sagged mournfully, its cushions torn, springs exposed like jagged teeth. Picture frames lay scattered on the floor, glass shattered, their faded occupants staring up at the peeling ceiling, forever trapped in moments of joy, now consumed by dust. Each object, a poignant echo of lives long past, resonated with an unsettling stillness. My eyes roamed, absorbing every detail, a morbid curiosity guiding my path through the hushed rooms of the first floor. It was a smaller space than I'd anticipated, and after only a couple of minutes, The lure of the unknown upstairs proved irresistible. The ascent was a precarious affair. Each step on the wooden staircase elicited a groan, a shudder, a chorus of protest from the ancient timbers. I imagined the whole structure giving way beneath me, plunging me into the forgotten darkness below, but the stairs held, albeit with a terrifying reluctance. The second floor opened into a narrow hallway. Two doors presented themselves, one ajar, revealing an empty, featureless room, the other stubbornly closed, its secrets locked away. I chose the open door, stepping into the barren chamber, my flashlight beam sweeping across the bare walls, seeking something. Then a sound. Hair-sharp, distinct thud from directly below me. My heart, a sudden frantic bird, hammered against my ribs. It was no settling house noise, no creak of old wood. It was deliberate, heavy. The easy confidence I had felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a cold knot of dread. "Leave," a voice screamed in my head. My friends and I had an unspoken rule. First sign of anything truly unsettling, we were out. Alone, that rule felt less like a guideline and more like a desperate plea for survival. I scrambled down the trembling stairs, my flashlight beam darting wildly, a desperate searchlight in the growing twilight of the house. The silence that followed the thud was absolute, suffocating. Nothing moved. No shadow shifted, no dust motes danced in the air. Yet the gut feeling, a visceral tremor of wrongness, refused to dissipate. I backed away, my steps quickening, turning to flee. As I reached the front of the house where the door had been left wide open, I froze. It was shut, not merely closed, but firmly, irrevocably shut. The sight sent a wave of icy panic through me. I lunged forward, grabbing the handle, twisting, pulling, pushing, but it was unyielding, locked from the outside. A cold certainty settled in my stomach. I was not alone. Someone had been here, someone was still here, and they had locked me in. Adrenaline surged, clearing my thoughts with a terrifying clarity. The broken window, my only exit. I scrambled back, launching myself through the jagged opening, scraping my arm on a shard of glass. I hit the ground running, plunging into the deep shadows of the woods, my flashlight off, veering wildly from the barely visible path. My breath hitched in my throat, a ragged sound in the immense quiet. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig, sounded like pursuit. As I wove frantically through the dense trees, a flicker of light ahead brought me up short, confusion momentarily overriding fear. I pressed myself against the rough bark of an ancient oak, peering through the gloom. Red and blue, pulsating rhythmically, cut through the darkness at the end of the overgrown driveway. Two police cruisers, their emergency lights painting the forest in fleeting hues, slowly, deliberately, navigated the choked path, their engines a low hum against the silence. They passed by my hiding spot, a rush of urgent authority heading directly for the abandoned house, but something deep inside me knew, with an unsettling certainty, that they weren't there for me. I waited, a minute stretching into an eternity, before bursting from my cover and sprinting home, the fear a cold, hard knot in my chest. I never discovered who else had been in that house, or why the police had arrived with such alarming precision. The news in the following weeks offered no clues, no public statements, just an unnerving void. Whatever dark secret lurked within those walls, whatever entity had locked me in, it was something profoundly unsettling. And I knew then that I had only barely escaped something far worse. The memory of that house, with its silent secrets and the terrifying realization of not being alone, often crept into my thoughts. It was a stark reminder of the unpredictable darkness that could lurk just beyond the veil of the familiar. It was also a precursor, an unsettling prelude to another encounter with the forgotten, a different kind of edifice, a different kind of dread. It was 2016, a year etched in my mind for reasons that still raise the hairs on my arms. I shared a cramped apartment in the heart of the city with my two best friends, Jason and Andrew, as we navigated the final, grueling year of college. Our lives were a frantic blur of lectures, late-night study sessions and part-time jobs, leaving precious little room for leisure. But when those rare windows of freedom did appear, we indulged our shared passion, exploration. Sometimes it was a winding hike through a lesser-known trail, other times a spontaneous road trip to a forgotten small town, just to wander its unfamiliar streets. This particular week, a glorious stretch of Friday and Saturday lay before us, unburdened by academic demands. The city felt suddenly small, its familiar rhythms stifling. Andrew, ever the information broker, had, through some circuitous friend-of-a-friend network, stumbled upon a rumor. A decommissioned factory on the outskirts of the city, a hulking relic rumored to be ripe for exploration. The idea, initially, was met with a mix of trepidation and tantalizing intrigue. None of us had ventured into anything quite so industrial, so overtly trespassing. The inherent risk, the unknown, hung heavy in the air, but the lure of a new, darker adventure ultimately proved irresistible. "Screw it," Jason declared, and with that, our fate for the evening was sealed. We piled into Jason's beat-up sedan, its suspension groaning under the weight of our collective anticipation, and drove towards the city's ragged edge. We were in the Midwest, a landscape of stark contrasts where urban sprawl abruptly surrendered to vast flat plains that stretched, featureless, to the horizon. The factory, we'd deduced from a pixelated satellite view on Google Maps, was nestled somewhere within this desolate transition zone. Its exact address, if it even still possessed one, was irrelevant. We parked several blocks away at a brightly lit gas station, a beacon of civilization in the encroaching gloom, and began our walk. The street leading to the factory was a ghost town, a desolate stretch of cracked asphalt and skeletal streetlights. No cars, no pedestrians, just a profound, unsettling silence that swallowed the city's distant hum. It felt as though this entire forgotten block had been excised from the living world. The factory, when it loomed into view, was a monstrous, imposing edifice, far grander and more menacing than any of us had imagined. Its sheer scale was dwarfing, a vast skeletal structure of rusted metal and crumbling concrete. Railings, catwalks, and pipes crisscrossed its exterior, reaching towards the bruised twilight sky like the twisted limbs of some metallic titan. Layers of graffiti, vibrant scars on its decaying skin, adorned its upper reaches, a testament to the audacity of past urban explorers. The chain-link fence, topped with menacing barbed wire, had clearly been breached countless times. Sections were cut, bent back, an invitation to a clandestine world. We crawled through one such opening, our clothes snagging on stray wires, the metallic tang of old rust filling our nostrils. The metal door at the front, heavy and scarred, stood slightly ajar, a silent welcome into the maw of the unknown. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, a shiver, cold and electric, traced its way down my spine. The vast, cavernous space swallowed us whole. The entire building seemed to breathe, swaying subtly in the relentless wind that whistled through unseen gaps. Metal groaned, a deep, resonant complaint, and creaked, a chorus of tormented sounds. It was, I reasoned, merely the wind's doing, yet it lent an unnerving, almost sentient quality to the decaying structure. Our paltry flashlights, cheap plastic toys Andrew had dug out of a forgotten drawer, cast weak, dancing beams into the abyssal darkness, struggling against the oppressive gloom. The main chamber was a labyrinth of colossal, rusted machinery, their functions long forgotten, their forms grotesque in the shifting light. Narrow pathways snaked between them, a perilous maze of sharp edges and oily shadows. We lingered there for a time, our voices hushed, our flashlights painting fleeting patterns on the grime-caked walls. Eventually, drawn by an irresistible pull, I gravitated towards the far end of the room, towards a darker opening that promised another passage. Before stepping into the deeper blackness, I glanced over my shoulder. One of my friends, a vague silhouette, was still behind me, lost in the confusing geometry of the machines. I couldn't discern if it was Andrew or Jason, but their presence, however indistinct, was enough. We were still together, or so I thought. I ventured into the hallway, its echoing emptiness unnerving. Another metal door, heavy and cold, marked its end. I pushed through it, stepping into a new, equally dark chamber. As I did, and the heavy door began to swing shut behind me, I heard them, footsteps, distinct and rhythmic, echoing down the hallway I had just traversed. Andrew and Jason, I thought, a surge of relief momentarily washing over me. They were following. I scanned the new room, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. More machinery, an inert conveyor belt stretching across the floor like a dormant snake, its metal teeth glinting dully. Above, a catwalk, a skeletal bridge of rusted iron spanned the ceiling, and I could see a rickety ladder descending from it on the opposite side. Just as my attention was fully absorbed by this new vista, the heavy metal door behind me groaned open, then slammed shut with a sickening thud. Andrew! Jason! My voice, a thin, reedy sound, was swallowed by the cavernous room. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting a frantic arc, expecting to see their familiar faces. But there was nothing. No one. The door stood firmly shut, a blank, unforgiving slab of metal. A cold knot of irrational terror tightened in my stomach. Had I imagined it? The sound had been so real, so distinct. Andrew? Jason? My voice was louder now, laced with a tremor of fear, the names echoing mockingly through the vast empty space. No reply, just the relentless groan of the building, the whisper of the wind through broken panes. A growing sense of dread, cold and pervasive, began to seep into my bones. I approached the door slowly, each step a conscious effort, my mind racing through a litany of impossible explanations. I fumbled with the cold metal handle and pulled. The door swung open with a rusty sigh, revealing the hallway, now bathed in my flashlight's beam. It was utterly, terrifyingly empty. What the hell? The whispered question was barely out of my mouth when a faint, scuffing sound, a soft crumble of debris, emanated from behind me, inside the room. My head snapped around, my flashlight beam whipping back a frantic search for the source. Standing perhaps 6 or 7 feet away was a man. His hair was a wild, matted tangle, a coarse beard obscuring half his face, and his eyes were unsettling, glazed over, reflecting the flashlight's beam with an unnerving, vacant intensity. For a split second, we were frozen in a terrifying tableau. Then, he moved. Not a walk, but an explosive sprint, a primal lunge as if intending to tackle me to the ground. Pure, unadulterated terror seized me. I stumbled backward, propelled by a raw survival instinct, out of the room and back into the hallway, slamming the heavy metal door shut with a desperate, resonant clang. Without a second thought, I sprinted down the hallway, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard them. My friends' voices calling out, their shouts muffled but unmistakable. They were searching for me. I burst into the main room, gasping, my lungs burning. "We have to leave," I screamed, my voice hoarse with terror. The three of us ran, a panicked blur, through the labyrinth of rusted machinery, out the main metal door, and towards the jagged opening in the fence. We didn't stop until we were back in Jason's car, the gas station lights a comforting, if distant, glow. On the drive home, I recounted the terrifying encounter, the details tumbling out in a breathless rush. He had followed me, that wild, deranged man, into the hallway, into the room where I had been alone. He had waited for me to separate, to become vulnerable. What he intended, what horrors he might have unleashed, I was spared the chilling discovery. That night cemented a new unspoken rule among us. No more abandoned buildings. Not after what we almost found out. It was a close call, a brush with a darkness I still can't fully comprehend, and to this day, the memory of those vacant eyes still haunts my dreams. The harrowing escape from the factory left an indelible mark, a chilling reminder of the unknown dangers lurking in the periphery of our lives. It was a stark contrast to the casual curiosity that had always drawn me to forgotten places. Yet, as fate would have it, another encounter, this one with an even older, more sinister kind of desolation, was waiting. This happened nearly 5 years ago, back when high school was the epicenter of my world, and my best friend Colton was my constant companion. Most days, after the final bell rang, we'd converge at his place, strategizing our next aimless adventure. The goal was simple: find some random, overlooked spot to simply exist, to fill the vast, unstructured hours of adolescence. This particular time, though, was different. Winter break had just descended upon us, a glorious 2-week reprieve from the suffocating routine of school, leaving us with an abundance of time and a palpable dearth of things to do. We'd spent the day in the familiar haze of Xbox, the digital world's a comfortable escape, but by late afternoon the screen glow had lost its allure. A restless energy stirred within us, a craving for something real, something tangible, something outside. Our town, like many others, had its own local legend, a spectral landmark whispered about in hushed tones, the creepy church. It sat at the very end of a deserted, overgrown road, almost completely swallowed by a dense thicket of trees that had long since outgrown their manicured bounds. For as long as I could remember, it had been abandoned, a decaying monument to a forgotten faith. As a child, the mere mention of its name had sent shivers down my spine, conjuring images of untold horrors. But as I grew older, that primal fear slowly morphed into something else, a nascent intrigue, a desire to understand the source of its lingering power. So, when Colton and I found ourselves wandering the edge of town and the overgrown mouth of the deserted road to the church presented itself, the decision was almost instantaneous. We wouldn't necessarily go in, we told ourselves, just a walk down the road, a reconnaissance mission to see its current state. But a shared unspoken desire hinted at more. If no one else was there, perhaps just a peek inside. The late afternoon had bled into a moonlit evening, the crisp winter air carrying the scent of pine and frozen earth. The moon, a luminous disk in the inky sky, cast enough silver light to guide our way, though our phone flashlights remained at the ready, a technological shield against the deeper shadows. The road itself was a testament to time's relentless assault. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ancient asphalt. Thick, tenacious vines and thorny bushes had pushed their way through the fissures, reclaiming the pavement inch by painful inch. By the time we reached the end, turning to glance back, the street we'd come from had vanished, swallowed by the encroaching wilderness, leaving us feeling utterly isolated. The church, revealed in the stark moonlight, was even more unsettling than my childhood nightmares had depicted. It seemed less like a building and more like a monstrous organic growth, its darkened silhouette a grotesque extension of the forest itself. Vines, thick as ropes, snaked up its walls, embracing the crumbling stone, blurring the lines between nature and architecture. Even the fence, which once presumably delineated a sacred courtyard, was barely recognizable, a skeletal framework drowning in a tide of tall, reedy plants. We squeezed through a section where the rusted wire had given way, the snap of dead branches underfoot, piercing the profound silence. As we approached the grand, foreboding entrance, an almost reverent quiet descended. No lights flickered, no distant sounds carried on the wind, no sign of any other human presence. The air hung heavy and still, charged with an inexplicable energy. With a shared glance, a silent agreement passing between us, we pushed open the large, heavy doors. The sound that followed was a visceral assault, a deep, resonant groan of ancient wood protesting against its long-held stillness, a slow, scraping shriek as the warped panels dragged across the stone floor. It echoed, elongated and amplified through the vast, hollow space within, a chilling welcome. We paused at the threshold, our flashlights cutting hesitant arcs through the oppressive gloom. What struck us, what was truly unsettling, was the interior's uncanny preservation. Rows of dark wooden benches stretched into the depths of the sanctuary, seemingly untouched by the ravages of time or vandals. No debris littered the aisle, no graffiti marred the walls, a stark contrast to the decay outside, an almost pristine stillness that felt profoundly wrong. I stepped inside, Colton following close behind, our boots scuffing softly on the dust-laden floor. We walked slowly down the central aisle, our flashlights dancing across the high vaulted ceilings, revealing glimpses of stained glass, muted and darkened by years of grime. Each of our footsteps, a crisp, singular sound, echoed and reverberated, magnifying the vast emptiness. We moved towards the podium, the focal point of the forgotten altar, the silence broken only by our own movements. Then, a sudden, heavy thud. It was distinct, unmistakable, a forceful impact that vibrated through the very fabric of the building, ringing through the entire church. Both of us jumped, a shared gasp escaping our lips, our phone flashlights snapping on simultaneously, their beams frantic and unsteady. The sound had been everywhere and nowhere, an amorphous presence that seemed to emanate from the very air itself, echoing and distorting, making it impossible to pinpoint its origin. We froze, lights sweeping wildly, searching for anything, any displaced object, any hint of movement. We saw nothing. Colton, ever the pragmatist, suggested it might have come from another room, a storage area perhaps, closer to the entrance, where something might have fallen. The rational explanation was thin, flimsy, barely covering the raw fear that had suddenly flared between us. Despite the unsettling incident, our youthful curiosity, mixed with a stubborn denial of the deepening dread, propelled us forward. I reached the podium, its dark wood scarred by time, and turned, looking back down the long, shadowed aisle. The entrance, now a distant, gaping maw, was shrouded in such profound darkness that even my flashlight struggled to penetrate it. After a minute, Colton, his voice a strained whisper, suggested we check out the other room he'd spotted. Along the side wall, a nondescript door, its paint peeling like ancient skin, offered another mystery. I pushed it open slowly, my flashlight beam stabbing into the darkness, revealing only vague shapes. We stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and something vaguely metallic. Stacked chairs, a silent congregation of forgotten furniture, leaned against one wall, while a haphazard collection of dusty boxes, a repository of forgotten relics, filled the corners. This was clearly a storage room, a place of containment. We stood there, the only sounds our own ragged breathing and the distant creak of the wind outside, our lights playing over the mundane clutter. Then we heard it again. A sound. Both of us froze, every muscle tensed, every nerve screaming. A light thump. Then another, distinct and deliberate. It was the unmistakable cadence of footsteps, moving slowly, rhythmically down the central aisle, the same path we had just walked. A cold, paralyzing fear seized us. The sounds emanated from the podium area, moving steadily towards the front entrance. We pressed ourselves against the wall, peering through a thin, splintered crack in the doorframe, our eyes wide, fixed on the impenetrable darkness beyond. Each thump, each scuff was amplified by the echoing silence of the church, growing closer, louder. Then, for a heart-stopping second, a fleeting shadow, a darker shape against the already profound darkness, crossed the sliver of our vision, moving past the crack towards the front entrance door. The footsteps stopped. We held our breath, our chests tight with terror, waiting. Finally, the heavy wooden door groaned shut, a sound that seemed to seal our fate. We looked at each other, our faces pale and etched with unspeakable fear. The unspoken question hung heavy in the air. What was that? We didn't know whether to run, to hide, to simply scream. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity, each second a slow, torturous crawl before we dared to move, our minds screaming at us that whatever it was, it had surely left. Then, as if a spell had been broken, we bolted. Bursting out of the storage room, we sprinted towards the front entrance, through the main doors, and out into the blessed, if still menacing, darkness of the night. We didn't stop running until the deserted road was behind us, the welcome, if faint, lights of the town a distant promise. We never knew who or what had been in that church. It had emerged from the deeper recesses of the building, from the very end of the church where I had stood moments before, an area with no obvious doorways, no visible hiding places. It had been there, right next to me, a silent, unseen presence. And to this day, years later, I am still not entirely certain it was a person. The chilling truth, a sliver of ice in my heart, is that it might have been something far older, far more insidious, and it saw us long before we ever saw it.